From shamans to scientists, mediums to masterminds, cannabis to LSD. Spark joy, spark curiosity, and spark a joint. Because you're listening to... Budding Mind. Budding Mind. Aloha, friends. Welcome to the Budding Mind podcast. I am your host, Brooke Bergstaller, and today I am so delighted to have not only one of the most incredible artists of our times, one of the most beautiful and poetic singer-songwriters, a brilliant mind, but also my best friend on planet Earth, Megan Kinney. Thank you so much for carving out some more time for me. I know you give me a lot already. I promise I'll only take up 45 this time. I'm actually looking at the clock. Okay, perfect. Wow,
Good.
That's beautiful.
No.
How you doing today?
Thank you so much for having me here. I get a little emotional because it's so much fun to have time carved out to discuss things that, not our mundane existences that we usually share, but really witness each other's brilliance in a different format. So thank you.
It's funny because all I heard there was you think that my life is mundane. I'm kidding. I'm definitely kidding. Okay, so you ready to dive into it?
Yeah, let's do it.
So I have been on a big magic kick lately, and I actually have you to thank for that because a long time ago you showed me a TED Talk by the author of this book, Big Magic, Elizabeth Gilbert. And she talks about this amazing idea that whatever is created on planet Earth has to be born. And that as an artist or as a creator, if you have an idea, it is your responsibility to birth it into existence. And if you don't, someone else might get to it. And so there's almost this inherent creative responsibility to put forth work into the world. And I'm curious about your creative process. You're always making dope shit. Do you feel like a channel of your work? Do you feel like it's gifted to you in some capacity? Like, what inspires you and what is your process like, and how is that maybe connected to a higher sense? Yeah, we're starting off light.
Yeah, let's go. No, I think it's interesting what you said a moment ago about fearing the mundane, and I think that the creative process can be the whole spectrum of it. It can be these moments, these flashes of brilliance, and early on, I think in my songwriting career, my life as a creator, whatever you want to call it, I kind of got addicted to that feeling of like you get struck by lightning and you have to get this down on paper, and it's this whole kind of brilliant experience of being a channel or being a vessel for something that has a frequency that's higher than our human mundane existence. But I think when you choose to commit to do something, it can be 80 to 90% a mundane existence of just trying to set yourself up in a position of discipline so that you just show up for the work every day. And it might be shit for however many days in a row, and then you might have a tiny little whisper that you hear, and you have to follow that a little bit and kind of pique your curiosity to go after a song, and then maybe you'll sit with a song for 5 years and never figure it out, and then someone else comes along and has a cue to help you continue it.
I love that.
I used to think that I would always remember every song I'd ever written, or that I would, and I've definitely reached a place in my life where I have too many freaking notebooks. I don't know where's what, and I can't remember the song that's been written, and I think that's honestly pretty amazing. But yeah, I think inspiration can come from all different sources, and as I grow, I'm kind of more open to that evolving and changing, because the second that I think like, oh, this is how my process has to be, and I go for it consistently, and then it doesn't pan out the way that I want it to, I'm like, oh, I just have to be open to what happens. Some days I'm gonna want to be in my underwear and dance around, and other
Most days, hopefully.
I
think that's really cool what you said, that there's a balance between, you can be very high and mighty and spiritual about it. Yes, like all of my songs find me. But as a human being, you also have to find them. You have to work to create too. It's not all magic, and in the mundane is magic.
Yeah, it's the process of finding the magic in the mundane that you learn. Any mindfulness practice, it's how you do one thing is how you do everything, and I just continually get slapped with that all the time.
Damn, y'all, she's fucking wise. Well, speaking of, whether songs come to you or you're writing them in your underwear and you're bored, I've known you for a long time. Can't do much math over here. More of a words gal, but 10 years, 12 years, whatever.
10, yeah. I think it'll be 10 years. No, more than 10 years because
almost
college, 2009.
15 years. Okay, anyways.
It's been a minute.
Numbers. But I've known you since you really picked up a guitar and started dedicating yourself to a musical practice. And, you've always... And Megan's an incredible acrobat and dancer and expresser and wordsmith and all of these things. But, all of these different aspects of yourself came together with the glue of music, and it's been very phenomenal to watch your journey. But the songs that you first started writing in a Las Vegas hotel room to the songs that you're writing now, in a beautiful Silver Lake home, how has your musical style and your expression of writing evolved alongside you as a human being, just growing? I don't know, just talk to me a little bit about that, things you've noticed in your experience.
Yeah, I think more and more what you and I, where you and I met as a friendship was no matter what it is we do, our journey of understanding ourselves is kind of it's at the forefront of our lives, whether we chose that to be or not. And I think it is at the forefront of every human being's life. It's just not everyone actively chooses to present that way or to take the step to dive in. Yeah. And I remember,
I don't recommend it.
It shit could get crazy. But I think that the music, I don't know that I necessarily knew it when I was younger, that's what was happening, and that kind of lended itself to be a beautiful naiveness to it in a way. It was just these things are happening to me and I'm experiencing them. Now I have a little bit more of an understanding of okay, this thing that's coming up might be me processing something in my subconscious in a certain capacity, and maybe I can actually listen and learn from this song. Yeah, and but also I wrote songs when I was younger that I don't think I really understood, and now I listen back to them and I'm oh, that made sense. Now 10 years later, I was writing something I didn't have the capacity to understand because it just wasn't there yet. But creativity doesn't know time. It's there's a brilliant book called The War of Art. Have you ever?
No, I haven't read it. Can't read.
It's tricky, Sometimes it's putting things together. But I actually was reading it the other day, and there's a quote in there that says that music or creativity is like the timeless communicating through the time bound. And I think that hit me so hard because I was we do have, there's a support that if you feel you get from another place when you're making something or something comes through you or you're writing, and it just seems to happen. And I think that where it's coming from doesn't really have time in the way that we humans have time. And so certain things can come out at certain points in a career. One of my biggest role models is Joni Mitchell, amazing creator. I know I was going to say that.
Megan in 20 years, 30, 40 years is going to be Joni frickin' Mitchell.
Dude.
Long, straight, white hair with the bangs. You gotta have the bangs.
I was thinking about giving myself bangs. I'm always thinking about giving myself bangs, but...
Sorry to interrupt.
No, I'll always take an interruption for Joni. One of the first songs I ever learned on guitar was Both Sides Now by her. And she has a very funny way of putting it. She's like, I wasn't in the right role when I wrote that song. It's not an ingenue song. And I wrote it when I was an ingenue. and she thought it was funny. She was like, you know, a 21-year-old woman singing about having seen life from both sides at that point didn't really make sense. And she got to do it later again in her 60s and in a whole beautiful component of orchestra and things. And I don't know that I've ever had as intense of a sort of misplaced timeline of a song, but for me personally, I'll write something and I'm like, you didn't know what the freak you were talking about back then. And now it seems to resonate so much deeper as most things in life.
Really profound, and it ties back to the big magic idea in some ways, that if an idea keeps tapping on you, then it probably does want to be born through you, and you literally just might not understand why.
Yeah. Sometimes you just got to surrender to it and be like, this is the sounds that are coming out of me now, and maybe it's going to make sense one day.
I can't help think about, this is a bad joke, but whatever. I can't help think about the Spice Girls song, When Two Become One. I think they very well knew what that meant at the time. But Brooke, little Brooke, when she listened to Two Become One, I was like, oh, best friends become one. And that's, best friends are basically one person. It's best friend. And now I realize it's like a really naughty concept. This is not the same at all, but I just wanted to let you know that Spice Girls is on my mind.
Is this one of the songs? Is this a shift? For a while it was come on pretty mama, let me do that conga. No, you can't control yourself any longer.
Sorry, I am not licensing this music, so I need you to stop singing.
I'm so sorry.
But speaking of music licensing, wow, what a segue. Wow, segues are an art form, let me tell you.
Damn.
So Megan has started, along with a band of hooligans, a music licensing and so much more company called Bad Owl. And, you know, I think at like a baseline level, I understand the mission, but I would love to hear a little bit deeper from you. You make music licensing really interesting, and it's not for the average person who doesn't know a lot about it, but I think what is so interesting is that, so if you don't know at home, all the music you see in commercials, every movie trailer, everything, every TV show, if there's music in it, there is a chain of people behind getting that song to you, and it ends at the artist, and the artist is like the last person to see the money, and that sucks. So I would love to hear from you why this is so important to you and how you want to help lift artists up by providing them with a better platform to get their music heard.
Yeah, I think you are very eloquently put. That is exactly what occurs. And I think that my little artist brain who had...
She has a little artist
It's just tiny little artist brain was in there just looking at the situation of how am I going to... I love making music. I know that I love that this is what I want to do. I met a group of people and I was like, these people love making music and this is what they want to do all day long. I would like to continue doing that with these people. Mostly, again, tying back to what we said before, is that like in creative process with humans, it's like this interesting petri dish for exploring one another's consciousness on another kind of level, because you're not just, talking. You're, which also is a very amazing thing that we're experiencing right now. But when you're kind of translating this interesting creative energy into something, you also are really learning about human dynamics in a very interesting psychological and spiritual and emotional way. So I realized that. I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. How do you make money at it? That's a whole nother thing. And it's always like, oh, do what you love and the money will come. And
you're like, where is it?
Yeah.
You keep doing what I love.
Just keep doing this. But we had a kind of a cool experience, I think it's 3.5 years ago now, where this band that I started working with, the two producers of the band called Karmic, really awesome band. You guys should go check it out.
Plug.
Yeah. They had a license for one of their songs in a Samsung commercial. And it was a large chunk of money coming to them. And it was really exciting. And we were kind of starting to formulate a business around it, figuring out the dynamics. How do we take this group of artists and how do we put it together and make an LLC? And kind of see if we can become the person that's in between us and Samsung, because we come to find out that the initial budget that they had for the commercial was much larger than what we ended up seeing, because there were 3 people in between. And so it was like, well, how do we cut out those middlemen and just become that person? Hysterically, and it's with most things in life, in the process of trying to get rid of the people in between, we have become one of the people in between.
You are the man.
Yeah, but I think as with anything in life, like if you can move the needle a bit in the direction of goodness, of actually taking into account certain things that, industries get created and things have to move quickly, and I think people don't necessarily think about a lot of the kind of existential questions behind why we build the industries that we do. Why do we do business the way that we do? And
absolutely. So
I was really drawn into it because I love being in constant existential crisis. So why not do it involved with something that I love? And the music industry is an industry that is hurting in a lot of ways, because people just kind of move without contemplating what they're doing when they're really holding the sacredness that is music. Mm-hmm. It is vibrating air. It is frequency that allows us to move through things. It is, it's this one of the most healing, every art form is healing in its own capacity. Music moves us in a certain way that is so unique to itself and what it's capable of doing for like causing great shift on the planet. It is
totally. Of course.
Yeah, it is a magical thing. So back to the sort of concrete aspect of this, we were like, let's just figure out how to create deals where we're thinking with the artist in mind. We are artists, so what feels good when we're crafting a deal, when we're trying to connect music with brands and with movies and things that actually compensate artists better than, say, streaming royalties.
Right.
How can we shape this so we're authentically thinking about the music first and the artist?
Which in most creative industries is just, as you were saying, is not the norm. And
yeah.
Oftentimes when systems are put in place and they've existed for decades, especially as someone new to the scene, you don't question why things are the way they are. You just want to participate. Yeah. Like, oh, you're going to take 20%? Okay, that's fine. I guess 20% of the song that I spent 4 years writing? Oh, that's totally fine.
Yeah. And
okay.
And for the most part, like the music industry has been like, we'll own it. We will own everything that you're doing. And then we'll give you a little piece of it if it does well. Or we'll spend a bunch of money on you and you'll be crawling your way out of a hole. You won't see any money along the way. We'll give you this money up front. You have to make it back. And if you don't make it back, we're just going to drop you and leave you without any ownership of the thing that you made and put into it. And it's one of those things where you start getting into, you start seeing deals. And this was kind of in the beginning, we were like, how do we actually get our hands on more contracts that we can see and we can actually look at them? And one of our team members, LP, is a lawyer, and she, we just started looking at contracts and kind of contemplating how can we just shift the dial a little bit in the direction of humanity, really, and like honoring each other and valuing one another. We haven't quite figured it out entirely, but we're working on it every single day. And I really believe in my heart that we're in a super powerful time where even just piquing the conversation or like proposing to someone, hey, maybe if you think about this from the perspective of the creator or from the perspective of the person who is building the contract, who's writing the contract, and the art form of what it means to write a contract. If we can kind of like see each other and what we're doing and value one another with authenticity and transparency, it makes everything work better. And so that's really what we're trying to do at Bad Owl.
It's so epic. Everyone listening, absolutely check out Bad Owl and their library of musicians. And if you need any music for something,
we've got.
Hey, that intro to the Budding Mind podcast, that's a Bad Owl tune, baby.
Yeah.
Okay, so you made me think of two things. First of all, talking about LP, your lawyer, and just like the density of contracts, how important and powerful it is to have a lawyer friend. I was just thinking, wouldn't it be really cool if we had like lawyer friend mixers, where lawyers could come to mixers and meet groups of friends that like need lawyers in their lives.
Yeah.
And then you give them a more interesting life and they give you the ability to read contracts. Now, moving along from that.
I think this is a great idea.
You started Bad Owl how many years ago?
It's been about 3.5 years.
So you've, I mean, from what was an idea that was created in the living room to now signing contracts, having multiple artists that you're juggling, recording original music, you're working on pitches for like HBO, for Netflix, for huge networks. Like, this is so exciting. And you're only on a trajectory upward, but you are gaining traction, you're gaining success, and you want to create a system that is combating the systems that already exist. How, as you find more success, will you maintain integrity? And I don't question that in you as my friend, but I would love to hear that perspective from you if that's something you've toyed around with at all. How do you not fall for the same trap that's been set up for you?
I wholeheartedly believe it comes from just consistent contemplation. I can't say for certain, because I can't say much for certain. But that's my inkling. That's what I'm curious about most, is kind of if we can continue to question what it is we're doing enough that it keeps us open to evolution without holding us back from moving forward. Because sometimes you can get so in the kerfuffle of whatever it is that you get paralyzed in the questioning of what it is, the relationship consisted in discussing whether or not it existed. And we've definitely been there as a company, because again, I love using a business. What is it? It's a petri dish for human evolution. It's just another opportunity for people to get together and try and figure out how to work together and make something larger than themselves. And there's been times where it's the contemplation supersedes the ability to move forward. And where we are now is really trying to keep the energy and momentum of moving forward, but consistently have check-ins so that we know where everyone is at and are able to
keep that in mind.
Yeah, to keep that in mind and hopefully not become the thing that we hate. Hopefully make it a spiral, not a circle, I always say. Like, it's, we're going to have to go back past the same place, but hopefully it's moving in a direction. We're not just going to be in a never-ending loop of whatever.
Oh, and another thing the other night, Megan and I, our incredible friends, hosted a Crypto 101 session for us. And it was well over my head, but, I gleaned some nuggets of at least things worthy of my contemplation, maybe not full understanding. But I bring this up because we discussed NFTs. And for those of you who are listening and you don't know what an NFT is, let me chonkily explain it to you. A non-fungible token.
Yeah!
It is essentially a digital entity that exists, and there is always a record of who owns it behind it, attached to it, right? Mm-hmm. So, what we're seeing NFTs as in the crypto world right now is they are art forms. They're digital art forms, pieces of art that only exist on your phone. You can only see them in the digital sphere, and people can buy them with crypto. And I hopefully this isn't totally confusing, but I mentioned this because a friend last night who was hanging out with me had never heard NFT.
Oh, really?
Literally never heard of it. Wow. So just wanted to put that into people's consciousness to begin with, but NFTs kind of play into licensing in a new world in a really interesting and complex way. But is that something that you could speak to a little bit? Like, is this on your brains at all right now to dive into that world?
Yes. I mean, honestly, it's been floating in my mind so much on a level of contemplation, on this kind of philosophical level of what's happening with our industry, because again, it's like we're constantly just trying to shift things to have transparency, because that's another thing that is really, really missing from a lot of our industries. I don't think the music industry has that on lock. I think every industry that people are trying to break out of at this point are struggling with the fact is that we We don't really have to share everything that's going on. We don't have to share what kind of taxes we're paying. We don't have to share what
how much that person's getting paid.
Yeah, what the practices are of involving the environment. Like, these things are can be kept under wraps, and we know that when we hide things or we repress things, usually they come back to bite us. And I think that's kind of where we are collectively right now. But NFTs make it very exciting being placed on the blockchain, because transparency is a huge part of that. You can see every transaction. And what makes NFTs incredible is that formerly, when an artist sells a piece, and this, goes mostly for visual art, in the sense that if you are starting out and you paint a dog and it's like this great dog, and you're like, okay, here I am at this age and I sell you this dog for $20, 15 years from now, when your dog painting career has exploded and you try and sell and someone who ever bought that for $20 sells it for $200 million, you don't make anything off of it, because
you sold it. It's done. Transaction complete. And now it's just the art dealers that are making the money off of it, and the people that are, it's a separating class in another way of the people that can hold the art, and then the artist gets screwed over at the bottom. So with an NFT, common story.
Yeah, we're seeing it again. But an NFT, you can attach a percentage on a smart contract that is held on the blockchain. So forevermore, if you put an NFT, and you could attach a digital NFT to a physical dog painting, like you could have a digital version of it, and then also the dog painting, forevermore, you could receive anywhere from 10 to 50% of
every future sale
of that thing.
And so how that ties into music licensing is that, and that totally exists in the digital space. So if I sell you my song for a show and then it gets used somewhere else, I will always receive a percentage of my song, and or the royalties.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that is what the intention behind the really complicated system of collecting music royalties, which I won't bore you all too much with, but it's they tried to solve the problem. Especially when there used to be sheet music for actual songs. So there would be a copyright on the sheet music. But the system hasn't evolved since that time. Where, like, we don't really sell sheet music anymore. People still buy it. That's a thing. But it's not like generally people aren't going to the store and buying the sheet music so that they can play the piano, and then the composer isn't getting a cut off of that. Mm-hmm. We just have this super archaic system that doesn't allow for money to move at the rate at which our society is moving.
Yeah, and things are existing more in a digital sphere now. It's not sheet music. It's not as tangible. So it makes sense that an economic system would have to rise to meet the times. But how exciting! And what's really like crypto, and this is not a crypto podcast, so God, sorry I went there. But like, it really does push the edge of my mind. It really it pushes the edges of my understanding, and it's really cool when things do that as human beings, because life is so day to day, and like when you get to learn something new, what a gift, like these breaths of fresh air. And even if it is like an overwhelming amount to really wrap yourself around, it's worth it. If there's an interest there, it's worth it to tap at the edges. And something that obviously taps at our edges, are plant medicines. And I almost, there was like some kind of parallel between the rise of the crypto world expanding us and how psychedelics expand us, and just like the need for the capacity of the mind to be able to hold these new ideas. And I largely attribute that, in my experience, to plant medicines. And so I would love to pivot our conversation a little bit here.
Yeah.
And I guess first thing that's on my mind is plant medicines are becoming so popularized right now. And you and I have been, taking mushrooms and LSD for many, many years. So how are you, how are you observing this rise in popularity and holding your own authentic relationship with these substances? It's quite the pivot.
Well, no, I mean, I will say I definitely think that plant medicines have helped with the rise of cryptocurrency. I think because they elevate you to
Be
just
able to perceive
yeah.
something new, like
Oh,
okay, sure, I'll jump on the bandwagon of this like totally etheric system that's just on computers.
you have a new perspective on it, and so suddenly you can contemplate the things that you were doing for a very long time a certain way, and it's like you get another rung up on the ladder. And I think psychedelics just aid in your ability to do that. They broaden your perspective, and I believe it's gonna work together for good. I really do. I think, of course, my heart sometimes questions when anything becomes too popular if people will hold the sacredness of it. And I'm sure there's going to be it's going to be some trial and error as we move forward. And
Totally.
all the uncles are doing ayahuasca and stuff. Like, we got to...
All your uncles.
All my uncles. All the
Not my
collective uncles. No, I say that because it was like 2 Christmases ago where I feel like I had like multiple uncles at Christmas start being like, so like Michael Pollan has a book about psychedelics, and I feel like that really reached the uncle demographic where it was like, okay, now we can start talking about this. And I was the person that they came to want to talk about it, and I'm like, I kind of fill that role in my family.
How epic. How epic to not be the black sheep, but to be the technicolor coated sheep.
Yeah.
That is vibrating in a rainbow of colors that is so intriguing and enchanting that your backwoods uncles and aunts are like, I want to know more about that.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to make fun of you, and I'm not going to challenge you. I might just listen to you. Like, to hold that space in your family's lineage is like, whoa, how lucky. And also like, whoa, it's not a burden, but like, really, me? I'm going to be the container for all this, okay? But you were talking about as things become more popular, how will we maintain the sacredness of these I believe these plants have consciousnesses.
Yeah.
And when we dabble in their realms, we get to experience their consciousness. And there's something totally, not something, consciousness is sacred, whatever level it's at. And, I obviously work in cannabis, and I see so many parallels to the psychedelic movement that are great, which is essentially the legalization and understanding that these are medicines and they should be free for all. But there is, with any sale of any product, you lose integrity. Yeah. Because first things first, when something is being sold, the first objective of that business is not, how will I change the world? Yeah. You really, and I would love to be challenged on that, but the first objective is, how do I sell this thing? And then it might be, but I want to sell it with integrity and authenticity, and I want it to really help people, but first I'm going to try to convince as many people as possible that this is the magic pill for them. And it's a really interesting time that I hope to bring more light to in just the questioning. The questioning of everything. Yeah. And if there is something that I've learned from plant medicines, it's question everything, even the teachers themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I just am seeing the parallel of this, of what we were just talking about in the music industry, and what's interesting about music and plant medicine, and wherever these other consciousness come from, they have instruction sometimes in the level of sacredness, and you can try and tune it out, and I think a lot of people do, but whether the tuning out, which then leads you to a darker place, which then actually sets you back on track, it's kind of like, I oftentimes choose to take a macro perspective where you zoom way out and you realize good, bad, we don't know. It's all part of the ride. It's all part of the journey. So even if we have to go down a darker path of where the psychedelic can take you, ultimately you might have needed that in order to be knocked back in the direction. Huh. And I think, given the state of our world, that's often not the most popular opinion, because it's like, everything, there's so much suffering, there's so much pain. How can you say that's a part of what needs to happen? But there isn't anything else. Like, what else is there except for what we're here to experience? So you kind of have to allow. And I feel like that's where I'm at right now. I'm like, I'm going to allow these little mushrooms to get into, they might be getting pressed into pills and given to people in a capacity that like I wouldn't necessarily have thought was the right way to do it, or but they're still getting in there, and they're still expanding people's hearts and minds, and I think it's gonna help a lot. I think it's gonna really
of course.
And
you know, you're reminding me that above all, like, who am I to judge?
Yeah.
Who am I to judge? There's this beautiful phrase that I always botch, but you'll get the sense of it, which is there is no right way up the mountain.
Yeah.
The only wrong way is the person who is going around telling everyone else their route is wrong. There's a million ways up the mountain, though. Yeah. And that's the way it goes. So yeah, if you want to go to and honestly, I want to go to a ketamine clinic. Who am I kidding? Who am I kidding?
Dude, I mean, again, I come back to like the sacredness and holding that to it, which I think is really important. But then also taking the perspective that like, I think there's two types of people in the world, maybe the people that see the sacredness and the people that haven't yet seen the sacredness.
But they need to tap it first before they can get there.
Yeah, and they got to go through what they got to go through, and it can be a beautiful process. It can be a horrible process. It can be any kind of process.
It's all of the things.
Yeah.
I saw this fabulous meme the other day that was Thanksgiving's coming up. Don't know when this podcast will air, but it said, I'm going to coat the turkey this year in LSD and see who really has their shit together. And you really just never know what is going to come up when you're dancing with plant medicines. But I've had some crazy shit go down from mushrooms and LSD and ayahuasca, etc. And I know you have too, because I've been there for a lot of it. So is there one particular experience or journey or story that you could share with us? Perhaps it's even the first time taking a plant medicine, an entheogen, or maybe it's a time that was really dark and what you learned from it. Yeah, would love to hear inside that little artist brain.
Well, I think because we're both here, I might have to share a little bit about one time where we took LSD together in...
Great story.
In the desert. We were at a festival called Lightning in a Bottle, and young, and I don't really know that we understood what we were tapping into, but also it was a weird, it got dark and wild, and in festival settings too, like there's so many people, and there's so many people using these substances together, and the rate at which you can experience depth kind of can rocket you to places you aren't necessarily prepared for.
You tap into a greater trip. Like you're on your own trip, and then like the whole vortex of people around you is
amoeba of consciousness soup that you're kind of dumped into. And I just have this really funny visual of you and I just raising our hands. It just being like, I have a question. Where's the teacher? Is anybody that, like, who's in charge here? Was the theme. Like, who is in charge here, and how do which was very formative in my growth of, like, stepping into being an adult and realizing that there isn't really anyone in charge here. You're in charge. And it was so funny and silly, but I think it actually shaped me a lot in being able to step into my womanhood in like a new way.
God, I love that so much. Who's in charge?
I question it a lot now.
I really wanted some help. Like, can someone help me make sense of this? And that is a really interesting thing about journeying too, is making sense of it, and like letting your mind make sense of it, and not trying to combat whatever's happening in your mind when it doesn't make sense. And I think that's the really particularly tricky part that can send someone into a bad trip. And, you know, this is not to brag in any way. I find it fascinating, and it's presented its own difficulties for me personally, but I've never actually had a, quote, bad trip per se. I have learned things. I have gone to dark places. I've seen creepy crawlers in the universe. Like, all of that has happened, but it's never inside of those experiences while riding these chemical waves. I've never been like totally freaked the fuck out.
Yeah.
But human Brooke, outside of those experiences, can attribute so much fear.
Yeah.
That I get worried before I take mushrooms. And this didn't happen when I was younger, when there was less at stake.
Yeah.
When I would just be like, yeah, what's this? 4 grams? Whatever. Like, I didn't weigh it. But I think, yeah, now there's just more responsibility in life, and there's more layers and more that feels like it weighs on me. So when I do enter into these trips, sometimes like my heart... And it's good to have that fear, because you need to have that fear to keep you aware and present, and to ensure that you really care about the experience. But I ask this to you, like, how do you combat that fear? How do you manage that fear? Do you experience that when you're about to trip balls? Or do you just say, like, c'est la vie?
I mean, I honestly think I learned, I've said this to you before, but I think... particularly with cannabis, you taught me how to smoke weed and not freak the fuck out. Like,
oh, well, teacher has become stupid.
but I think that so much of our own personal perspectives, like, of life, again, of being able to step back and like, and really appreciate all of it, even like someone else might have had your experience and been like, this was a bad trip, but because you have the ability to really absorb and look at more holistic perspective of what's going on, it allows you to like to learn from it in a way that doesn't necessarily have to be a good or bad in whatever capacity. It's just like wisdom, which comes from life experience. And
love that.
I definitely, I mean, even we recently had an ayahuasca experience for Brooke's birthday. I hope that I can share with this.
Please
but it was
do.
I've been studying with ayahuasca and sitting with ayahuasca for 4 or 5 years now, and I've not in comparison, but I have done a fair amount of it, I think, in a certain way, and maybe you reach tears where you're like, yeah, like I know what's going on, like I'm gonna sit in ceremony, it's gonna be great. And then you have a ceremony where you sit with a bunch of your friends and you're taken to a whole nother perspective, and I was like completely humbled by that experience, completely humbled. And it does make me trepidatious to dive right back in to do it again. Like I want to take the time to really integrate those practices and really walk in this realm with those things that I've learned. And I think that's something that I've learned with age, is just allowing the time for the integration of what you've learned to like germinate and flower inside of you, because there's these little seeds that get planted, and allowing them space to grow is not something that I always could see in my younger self. Like I just kind of wanted the instant gratification of the feeling associated with getting somewhere other than where you are. And now it's different.
Well, that trepidation does, even if human selves perceive that as negative, perhaps it really is just like a push from the universe, a little send of like, pause, take time, take space, don't rush through this. Like, if there's fear there, then just like look at that. Then maybe that's you shouldn't dive right back in. There is more to unfold.
The fear sometimes is important because it's getting to the other side of the fear. Like we're always told, like, don't have fear, but fear can actually be a very informative. All of our emotions are like guardrails in certain capacities that are just directing us in a certain way. So if we can look at it, we can learn from that as well. Learn from it all.
Wow. All right. Well, you obviously, and I'm sure everyone's gleaning, have a huge container of wisdom inside of that very small and jacked body. But I have one final question that I'm going to pull out your last nuggets. So this is the Budding Mind podcast. What?
Budding Mind.
Wow. We love to expand perspectives. That's what I live for. I love to have my mind changed or probed. And so perhaps there is something that you could share, a moment in life where either a concept expanded your mind, pushed you, or something where you've changed your mind, changed your stance.
Oh my goodness. I think it gets changed every day now. I think
there's a lot of information coming at us, so it's good to stay open to that.
Yeah. I mean, and maybe that's just it, is that you live and you think that things will be a certain way, and then they aren't. And that seems so simple and silly. But I think just allowing, being present to what is different than trying to figure out what you are, I guess. And especially like pursuing a creative career in Los Angeles, you kind of have this idea that sometime at one point you make it, or it's a and I've been impressed at how long that little thing can hang on, that concept can hang on, that there is a point at which you make it and life becomes a thing, whatever the thing you thought it was going to be. Like that's it grips, it hangs on, and in reality it's just this beautiful continuum of things, and allowing it just continue to move. That's the deeper I can hold on to that and really let go of the concept that there's anywhere to get, the freer I feel.
There is no different than here.
Mm-hmm.
You just gave me mad chills. All right, my dear darling Megan Kinney, who I love with my whole heart. Thank you so much for, gracing us with your time and your words and your processes. Can you tell everyone where they can find your music first? And in the digital spheres, how they might connect with you?
You can find me on Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, YouTube. I am Kinney at I am Kinney. And, well, on Spotify, it's just Kinney. And I have an album out called So Glad You Exist, because I'm a little hard to find still on Spotify, but we're working on it. So, and on Instagram, I am Kinney.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much for having me, Brooke Bergstall. I love you with my whole heart.
I love you so much.
And I love Budding Mind.
Budding Mind.